What's the craziest meltdown you've seen at work? Story 1. I had a controlled meltdown. I was working the overnight shift at a convenience store. Due to the winter holiday season, the overnight shift wasn't on schedule for a few days, so this messed up the natural flow of the schedule. The assistant manager of the store, who got the job because her mother was a longtime manager within the company, did her best to make the schedule, but ultimately ended up messing it up the next week because of the awkward holiday week. No biggie. Mistakes happen. So I go to her nicely and say, "Hey, for the next week, can you set the schedule back like it was before the holidays?" She says, "Yes." The schedule goes back to normal for a week. The week after, it's the same exact messed up schedule. So I go to her again, a bit more sternly, "Hey, these days don't work for me. There are only 3 of us on the overnight shift, and the other guy I work with wants the schedule back the old way too. You don't need to change anything. Just copy and paste the week before. You're making needless work for yourself." She didn't like this, which I know because she was staring at me like I unalived her pet cat, but the schedule was back to normal. Until she would change it to the schedule no one wanted one last time. I was fed up at this point, so instead of speaking to her one-on-one as I had, I wrote a long note calling her out the same way I did personally, while subtly calling her stupid. I posted the note in the tiny office over the overnight portion of the schedule on her day off, so people of all shifts would see the note before she got a chance to. When I come in for my next shift, she's ticked off at me in the middle of the store saying, "What you did with that note was unacceptable. We're going to have a discussion in the office." Mind you, customers are all around the store, looking at both of us. So I decide, nah, we're not doing that. I say, "No, what you've been doing is unacceptable. How hard is it to not touch a schedule? Literally, all you have to do is nothing, and you can't even do that right. Consider this my 2 weeks' notice because I'm not going to work under someone unstable enough to yell at their employee in the middle of the store and then expect me to go to the office like this is middle school." The color of anger and shame on her face matched the dark red dyed hair she was so proud of, and I walked away from her to clock in and get my register counted. A couple of the other shift leaders would talk to me like actual people, so I didn't officially put my 2 weeks in for another month. The assistant manager was on her best behavior when we were forced to interact during the shift swaps, but she'd ultimately let her built-up frustration of losing to me verbally slip, and she made some comments at my expense that got back to me. I texted the main manager, "This is my official 2 weeks' notice. No other way around." I would then text him again after my shift ended that I officially quit. I'm someone who believes in signs, and that night a ceiling tile fell and water was dripping in multiple spots because a large amount of snow was melting on the roof of the building. I can remember scanning the store while I was at the register at like 3 a.m. and just thinking, this stuff's crumbling all around me. Gonna ride out the rest of this shift. Funnily enough, both the manager and assistant manager would get transferred and demoted not long after I left. I like to imagine the way I exited and the endorsements I got from the shift leaders was used as an example of how horrible bosses ruin incredible employees. Do you think those two got demoted because of this person? Maybe it was some other factors. I would like to hope that this person's example made some change happen in this store. It was just a schedule. You just had to keep the schedule the way it was. Story 2. In middle school, we had a sub that had a meltdown and at the end of the day, never came back. I was in 6th grade when everyone started, and this was a collaboration with my class and the class a year above us. The lady was subbing for language arts, and everyone kind of hated her because she always finds something to complain about and favored students in classes. At the time, I was still working on overcoming a speech impediment. Maybe it was saying impediment. I just couldn't make the R sound well at that point. And occasionally, my teacher would have me read with a PVC phone to hear myself and correct it. No clue how that was supposed to help, but it didn't. The sub hated the book Walk It in My Pocket, so when she was subbing long-term, the 7th graders decided to take turns sitting by the teacher's desk during SSR using the phone to read out loud. One day, they asked me to do it, and I did it. She got on me about it, and I told her, Miss, teacher's name, wants me to use the phone every weekday it was to work on my pronunciation. And she told me I should already be able to speak properly and that I was faking. A few kids stepped in and got mad at her for that because most of them had known me since I was a toddler, and they knew ours were hard for me. At one point, she went on a rant of some kind with the 7th graders that got pretty not school appropriate. She made a comment about it being good there weren't cameras in the classroom, and one kid said, "Actually, there are." And the whole class spent the rest of the period faking waving to cameras. They came in during recess and recorded it on a kid's iPod, and the next day showed it to her. She started panicking and left for the rest of the day, and she never subbed for the rest of the year. My 7th grade teacher, the school decided to mix 7th and 8th graders for language arts, my 7th grade year. I don't know why, but it was a small school, and there were only 8 8th graders. Anyway, our teacher had to be gone for a couple of days, and that sub was called in because all other subs in the area were unavailable, according to her. I don't know why or how, but it was like the classes collectively decided to mess with her. I was one of the kids that always tried to stay quiet and follow rules at that point, and I'd gotten pretty good with the R sound. We were supposed to be working on our group projects, and it was crazy. It's a bit of a blur, as it was about 9 years ago, but one of the kids in my class who used to tick me off a lot decided to come over and bother me and my group until I snapped and yelled at him to leave me alone and stop being stupid. That was what made this teacher snap. Me saying stupid. She got little kid angry, stomping her feet with her fists balled up by her sides, and screamed, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" until everyone stopped what they were doing, and she stormed out of the room and left the school. The principal had to have different teachers fill in as subs for the rest of the day and the next. Our teacher had apparently asked for that lady to not sub, and they still put her in. The worst thing that happened was the principal talking to us and telling us she was ashamed. This sounds like every movie or TV show where you have that one class that is always testing the new teachers that come in and trying to break the record of how short a time it takes before they give up and leave. And this looks like it just happens in real life. Wow. Story 3. Okay, this was me with a meltdown, and just so you know, I've started medication and working at a new job after this happened, so stress hadn't gotten to me for a while. This happened back when I worked at Walmart in the online pickup department. They were building us a whole room, but at the time of this incident, we were sharing a narrow hallway with the grocery and produce departments. There was this girl who worked there. I'm calling her S, who nobody liked, to be honest. She would just stand around and do absolutely nothing but dispense, which would result in her doing nothing for like 60% of her shift. Well, one day, we got hit in the evening with a full lot of people trying to get their orders on a short-staffed day. We were behind on stacking or organizing the orders, so the preppers had some difficulty finding all the totes. We fell so behind that 3 managers had to come and help get the orders out, the line going back about 20 feet. And guess what S does? She decides to go on her 15-minute break. Her excuse? Her mental illness. I know that can get really bad sometimes. I deal with anxiety and depression, but she used it so often that I'm fairly certain she was faking it half the time just to get out of work. I flipped when she tried to go on a break at that moment, like full-on screaming at her in front of 3 managers, like the general manager team over the entire store. We got into an argument, which she ended up with saying that if she doesn't do it on break, that she will throw up. That's the only reason why I let her go. I think she came back right as the rush ended, but I was avoiding her for the rest of the shift, so I didn't notice. This one coworker that I actually liked said that it was the highlight of her evening. I think what shocked me the most was that F was fired later that week. She tried to claim that she quit because no one cared about her. Her friend there, that nobody liked then either, but slowly got used to, tried to keep the same story going, but we all knew the truth. Funnily enough, I never got in trouble for that. Me and S just never liked each other there, but contrary to her belief, and to my surprise, like 90% of the department, and some from other departments, were all on my side. She once tried to turn that one coworker against me, not knowing that coworker is my little sister. Yeah, that's the difference between a lazy teenager who does one job and the hard-working 22-year-old who did just about everything in the department and did it well. Do you think this one was justified? Do you think that this person deserved to get yelled at? It sounds like they got support because this person S, did not ingratiate herself with anyone else on this store, really. What do you have to do to tick off all the employees at an entire store? What has to happen to make that happen? Story 4. The day I came back to work after my first ever psych ward visit, I was very embarrassed. It was for depression and panic attacks due to PTSD. My coworkers were understanding, and my manager was hell-bent on making sure my recovery and medicine adjustment was going to be as smooth as possible, given I was a very valuable member of his team. Only one person at work wasn't on board with me having my required medicines at work. An immediate supervisor who was 19 years old and only got the job because her father was a commander on the base I worked and lived on. She was formally very mean to me because I'm non-religious, and everyone knew this and was happy that the office atheist would take all the Sunday shifts to allow folks to go to church. She pretended to be happy to see me back when I arrived back that Monday morning to put my new meds in my locker. She gave me a hug and tried to discreetly take my bag of medications out of my locker to toss them out while telling me, "You need Jesus, not this poison that'll make you sicker." I told her this is what I need to avoid self-termination again. She said that was due to my atheism and my heathen ways. I told her this was blatant discrimination, and I locked my meds in my locker to tell my manager. The manager brought us in to talk. Her reasoning for being harsh on me was that atheists don't have First Amendment rights to protect. My boss pulled up the training slides we were all supposed to do and the history of the Supreme Court case that made it official that atheists indeed have First Amendment protections. She then played the race card and said I had no standing because I was white and deserved no rights. He said that doesn't matter and fired her for racial and religious discrimination, plus endangering an employee under her supervision. All because she wouldn't shut up.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 5. I've never experienced them, mainly because my absence causes them, but there have been several meltdown walkouts. The problem is that the owner has to cover the office when one of us is off, and she's a narcissistic idiot with zero respect for her staff who thinks what she's working on is more important and jumps on every opportunity to countermand what any of her minions say to show off to customers that she is the boss. Oh, and she delights in shouting at you, but only in front of customers, or at least as many other staff as possible. When I first joined the company, there was the owner's daughter-in-law as the office manager, a woman working part-time, and me. Turns out, I was being trained to take over daughter-in-law's non-managerial tasks, and she left after a few months. The first week's holiday I had after that, I made it to Wednesday before the owner rang asking if I could come in to work the last 2 days of the week because the part-timer had had a meltdown and walked out. I got promoted to office supervisor, and we hired someone else. Everything was fine for a bit, but then I had a week's break. The new girl managed half a day before breaking down in tears and running out, never to return. Next guy we hired, I tried to take the rescheduled holiday days off. He got into a massive row with the owner and got fired for speaking to her like that. Not sure when the row was, but apparently she tolerated him until Friday so she wouldn't have to call me in. She spent the next few weeks ranting about how she's perfectly entitled to discipline her staff and how some people just didn't know how to take criticisms. We had 2 more girls come in, do great, then have to work with the owner when I was off, and both quit after fun meltdowns. My current assistant is an incompetent idiot with zero computer literacy or respect for any of my systems or processes, but she's friends with the owner, so she's lasted a fair bit, all while relieving me of almost 0% of my workload. Story 6. I had a time working in an ice cafe, which was also invested in catering, real meals, benches to sit on, etc. I was usually the caterer, but also helped out at other departments when nothing had to be delivered, packed, or be taken back. I had my last day of work there as I was about to move to a new city to study at university the next day. We had a whole family party organized, plus I had to finish up in order to move out the next morning. I told everyone about it, already saying goodbyes, etc. So then there was this order which I had to deliver, but somebody forgot to put the forks in it. When I called the back of the kitchen and told them, they said they had none to spare and that I should take some from the cafe. So I did, and all was fine. But that day we had an unusual amount of customers, and I stayed an hour longer after one of my coworkers repeatedly asked for my help, and I was like, okay, I will do this, then leave. After the third time, I literally said to her, okay, this is the last time, but then I really have to go. Suddenly, another coworker shows up and tries to order me around to do other stuff, and then I have to start washing dishes as I am the reason they had no forks anymore. I looked at my other coworker and then decided, nope, I am not going to help anymore. I already made myself clear. The second coworker then completely lost it and started cursing at me, saying how bad of a person I am, and I followed her. We were always on decent terms with each other before, through all the customers to the back of the cafe where I had my car parked. And, in hindsight, not the smartest, argue with her. She then stepped it up by completely screaming at me in the parking lot, again wishing me to hell and running away while crying on the way to the kitchen, which was situated at the back. I've got quite some stares from my former coworkers. As I was tight on time, though, I decided to just leave, and that was the last experience I had at a working place that I actually enjoyed working on. It seems like that was this coworker trying to establish some sort of dominance by ordering someone around that was going to leave. I mean, why do that? This person has no stake in anything anymore and could do what that person did, just walk out and leave them. It's a shame that that was the last experience. Story 7. Here's a story that happened to me a few years ago. I was a new hire dishwasher for a restaurant chain, and at the time, I was the only dishwasher. So you can imagine the stress I was put under making sure every dish was clean for a large restaurant with just about every dish you can imagine, bar dishes too. I wasn't really known as the guy with an explosive attitude, and it takes a lot to get under my skin. At the time, a lineman, one of the cooks, was helping me for several weeks, but the entire time he was ridiculing my work when he's talking junk about me while I work. I got used to it over time, but one time he decided to take it a step further. In his words, "I'll gladly stomp his head in," referring to me. So I finally had enough. I threw down my dishes, luckily nothing broke, thus my anger, and walked over to him. Keep in mind, I can't fight, am scrawny, and definitely not very fast. The odds were drastically against me, but I didn't care. I had enough with it and shouted, "Okay, you want to stomp my head in? Fine, do it." He obviously was stunned by this and started making excuses like the cameras were watching. We stepped outside where there was no cameras. Then he started saying, "You go ahead and throw the first punch." I replied with, "Nah, you had the spheres to talk junk and threaten me behind my back, so grab your spheres and do it." Long story short, I called him out for being a P and destroyed his ego so bad he quit. A 17-year-old destroys an, early 30s-year-old ego. Story 8. I've got a story about my own work meltdown. A couple of years ago, I worked at an Italian fast food place. Points, if you can guess which, during the summer in between semesters. But I had injured my back prior to coming back for the summer. Well, this night, it was super packed and my back pain was at a 9 out of 10 when this old man was my next customer. He says he wants Alfredo, and so I ask him what noodle he wants. He just repeats it in a ticked-off tone that he wants Alfredo, and I reiterate to him that I need to know what kind of noodle he wants. You might say I should have known he wanted fettuccine noodles, but we had spaghetti, fettuccine, whole wheat spaghetti, and ziti pasta, and I didn't want to guess wrong and get yelled at. This tall, old mongrel leans down, puts his hands on both sides of my register and says, "You're just a clerk. Don't try to trick me." And I said through gritted teeth, "Sir, I need to know what noodle you want in order to put it in your order." And he just throws his hands up and says, "Get me someone else to serve me. There's clearly something wrong with you." I wish I had said something clever back to him, but my back was hurting so bad, I was stressed, and all I could get out was a "Curse you!" as I walked back to get my stuff while the assistant manager was telling me to go home, and I ended up sitting in my car crying for a while. I ended up keeping the job because they needed bodies, but never went back after that summer. Story 9. My chemistry teacher in high school started to crack during my semester in her class. She was really sweet, and all the girls really liked her and weren't really trying to make fun of her, but she had one of those strong Northeast accents, Maine or something. So if a word ended with a hard A sound, she'd pronounce it with an sound. The popular girls in class wanted her to pronounce things because they thought her accent was cute, but they'd giggle. And after a certain amount of that, plus our class was just being kinda unruly, occasionally she'd snap and yell, "Hey!" then loudly vent about us misbehaving or not paying attention, etc. The next semester, admin decides to have her ease up and teach physical science to freshmen, thinking that would be a bit easier on her. They forgot that younger kids are even more obnoxious and unruly than ones 2 years older and in the advanced placement class. She freaked out, threw a whiteboard eraser or marker, and hit a kid in the face. He had a bloody nose and had to go to the doctor, then started absolutely screaming at her whole class so loudly that you could hear her outside the building. They decided she needed a real break after that, and she went on administrative leave. I don't know what happened to her after that, though. I've witnessed a couple of teacher meltdowns. One kid got hit in the head across the lunchroom with one of those baseball-hard red delicious apples they serve. He had a hell of a lump. Again in middle school, a whiteboard marker escaped its cap during a heated classroom discussion, and smacked a kid in the face. Total accident, just funny to share. I didn't do my math homework in 7th grade. Didn't need to, and my teacher used every opportunity she could to make me work extra, work hard, or yell at me. She retired the same year as my mom, school nurse, and she still had a grudge about that homework, like nearly 20 years later. Still hadn't given it up.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.